We'll now start to get into the rendering side of Maya. This is an incredibly powerful part of the software, and you can do all sorts of amazing things here. Just some quick basics before we get into it. If you're not used to rendering beforehand, we're just going to be covering some quick concepts. You can think about a rendering scene kind of as a film studio. You need a few different things for it to work. First off, you need actual models. This is like building a set or having actors. Then we need lights, which can look like this. This is similar to lights you would use on a film set. And then you would need materials. You would have to say what are the different parts made of. Is it made of rubber, skin, glass, metal, etc.? You can also see we have an environment going around this as well. This is called an HDRI, and we have a separate chapter on that. But essentially this emulates lighting from the outside, which gives you really soft and natural lighting. Whenever I'm working, I really make sure that I keep my scenes very clean. So there's a group for the camera, there's a group for all the models, and these are split into environment and prop, and everything is named. This just makes everything so much easier and so much faster as well. Think about us having a clean film set versus having a film set where stuff is everywhere and people fall all the time and injure themselves. When it comes to the render engine in Maya, we are using Arnold. Arnold ships along with Maya, and it's really one of the more powerful render engines out there. Its origin is to be used in full-on VFX production, so it's really heavily geared towards that. It's heavily geared towards realism, and it's also geared towards having a lot of data go through it. This is both good and bad. It's really good in the way that it's very easy to actually work with, and it can just handle all sorts of crazy data. But it's also bad in a way that we can't really optimize it. There isn't really a way to optimize Arnold. You can optimize your scene, you can make your models lighter, you make your textures lighter and all that. But the way Arnold works is essentially that you will reduce the noise, and if you want less noise in a certain area, you will just have to increase the render time. The main concept is that human time is worth way more than computer time. So instead of you spending 2 days just optimizing the scene and rendering it out, it's better that you do a scene which is really, really nice, all the lights are perfect and all that, and then you let the computer deal with the rendering. Which means it's ideal for a lot of different things, but it might not be ideal for other things. Considering that when it comes to the global illumination and reflections and all that, you really don't have cheats like you might have in something like a V-Ray, or if we were to take it to the extreme, something like Unreal Engine. To access the render settings, we go up here and we see we have almost like this little camera icon with a gear on it. This gives up the render, and this gives us the render settings, and you can see it says so right here. Now, this is where we actually enable Arnold, and by default, it really should be enabled. You really don't want to have anything else enabled. These are ancient engines and are not updated. This is where we have the file name. If we don't specify anything, it's going to use a default file name, but you might want to force something in here like shot 10, sequence 10, shot 10, frame range, whatever. This depends on your production. If you're just dealing with a single personal project, you can just leave this empty. This is also where we have the file format it's going to be rendering at. By default, it's set to EXR, which is a fantastic format, and the compression as well. This is where we have the frame range as well, where you can actually force it to render out a certain amount of frames. By default, it's going to be set to a single frame, which means it's going to have the name.extension, which just means if this is called a scene01, this is going to be rendered out as scene01.exr. If you want this to be actually rendering multiple frames, we have to set this to something else, which actually allows us to have frames in it. This is just described by the hash. So now we can, for instance, set the frame range to be 1 to 1,000, and it will render every single frame. This is also where it specifies which render camera we're using. This is where I forced it to actually use this camera. By default, it will use a perspective camera, which is fine for if you know what you're doing, but you also want to make sure that you actually have a proper render camera in your scene. And this is where we have the resolution. We have a bunch of presets for whatever production you might be dealing with, but I tend to, unless I'm working for a specific resolution like HD, then I tend to just block in what I want here. If you want this to be 1280, you can easily do that, and we'll just set to custom. Then this is where we actually have the render settings. We have a whole chapter dedicated to this, but you can see how few settings there actually are, and they're all like 3 and 2. So it's really simple what you can do. There's a lot of very advanced math going on under the hood when it comes to Arnold, but in terms of the pure UI, it's actually quite simple. You really don't have a lot of settings to mess around with, which I personally really enjoy. Then we have system settings as well. I tend to not really play around with this at all. The one thing you might want to do is that if you have a GPU, you can change this to GPU. Now this depends on when you're actually watching it. Currently the GPU rendering is pretty buggy, so we're going to be sticking with CPU for this entire series, just because I don't find that it actually works very well at all. Then we have AOVs. This is essentially like render passes, where we can render out the diffuse by itself. We can have the opacity, the subsurface scattering, and all that. And then if we want to render, we can go to Arnold and we can hit render. And now you can see that it's actually rendering what we have. And this is the general render view. This is a completely different render view than what we have in Maya by default. And this is really made for Arnold. I highly recommend that you use this render view specifically, because this is so much more powerful and a lot easier to use. You can also change the render view right here, and you can pause and start the render view. So now we will just keep progressively refining it until it reaches the noise level you have currently set it to. So it's very nice and easy to render Arnold. It's incredibly easy to set up, and it's actually the first time when a render engine which ships with a software, it's actually my favorite render engine. Usually you have to buy expensive plugins like V-Ray or RenderMan or something like that, but Arnold is in no way a discount solution. Arnold is being used on movies as we speak. A lot of the main studios are using Arnold as their main engine, and there is a really good reason for that. Like I said, it's easy to set up, it's incredibly powerful, and it's heavily tested for basically anything. So the chances that it's going to break is very small. We also have a lot of very advanced features as well in it, like we have a lot of utility nodes. This just means that if you want to keep it simple, you can keep it very simple. And if you want to really go deep into it, you can also do that. So it's one of these engines which is actually perfect for beginners and also perfect for the most advanced technical director in the big studios, which is not often that you can actually see that. We also have shaders as well, which we can access if we click on the model, and then we have it all the way to the right. So here we have the different shaders, and this uses the Arnold shader. As you can see, AI is in front, and that just means it's an Arnold shader. AI does not stand for artificial intelligence. It just means that it's an Arnold shader. And the shaders are really powerful and also quite simple to use, and that's what we're going to get into in the next chapter.